All right, we're going to call this note 6.3. I accidentally had 6.4 here. Normally this would be a 6.4, but we're kind of jumping around because we're getting near the end here. So 6.3, Symbiosis and Defense. So we're going to be looking at some interesting ways in which different species interact with each other. And that is called symbiosis, when any kind of close long-term relationship between two species exists. Basically every species has some sort of symbiosis with other species. And for us to understand how that symbiosis takes place is going to help us understand how the ecosystem works and functions together. And also helps us realize, if one species goes extinct, how would that affect another species if they're dependent on each other in some way? Okay, what you should have is some sort of color code system. So red, yellow, and green is what I would recommend because we're going to be talking about negative effects, neutral effects, and positive effects. So if you have coloring pencils, highlighters, markers, anything is going to work for this that you can use to color. If you don't have yellow, maybe use black or so. Most people have green and red though. So, okay, so let's look at our first type of symbiosis, and that is mutualism. Mutualism, okay? So mutualism is when two species benefit each other, okay? So up here, I have species A and species B. We're going to be comparing how those species work together by drawing little pictures here. So I'm just going to draw a smiley face, okay? Or we could do a plus sign is what most people use to represent a positive benefit, okay? And I'm going to color code this one green, okay? So we got a nice positive benefit. So species A benefits species B benefits species A, all right? And mutualism, the most common type of mutualism that you guys might know is when a clownfish is with an anemone, they both benefit each other. You read a little bit about that. They found this example. Basically, there's a crab spider, okay, it lives on the bottom of the ocean. It's covered in algae. And so the algae benefits the crab because it gives it camouflage. And then the crab benefits the algae because it gives it a place to grow and to be its home. So there's a benefit that both offer each other. So if we wanted to use that example, we could say the crab is a home for algae. And then the algae is camouflage for the crab. Okay, so I'm going to color code these. The crab is going to be experiencing a benefit, and the algae is going to be experiencing a benefit. So both of those species are experiencing the green there. Okay, there's several different types of mutualism. So one of the most common types is a cleaning symbiosis. Okay, this is where a cleaner gets food by removing parasites from a client. Okay, so all of these are subtypes of mutualism. So these are all just examples of mutualism. So some ones that you guys found, there's an oxpecker on rhinos, zebras, okay? They eat the parasites off of those animals. Here's some more with that bird eating off of those things. Here's one Ethan found with, the oxpeckers also help the hippos by cleaning the parasites. So the bird is going to be benefiting because it gets food. The hippo is going to be benefiting because it gets clean. And same thing happens with fish there, okay? You might be more familiar, I like this picture Randall's found with the cleaning shrimp, okay? So we've got several Finding Nemo references here. So the cleaning shrimp is going to be getting some food from his cleaning job, and the fish is going to be cleaned. And so there's both a benefit for both, okay? So here we could say the shrimp gets food from fish, and the fish is cleaned by the shrimp in the process, okay? So both the fish and the shrimp species experience a benefit. So we'll color code those green. Okay, pollination, you should know about this one. Okay, pollination is when a pollinator gets nectar while distributing pollen for the plant, okay? So you might be familiar with like bees, might be the first one you think of, okay? Asha found a nice one of hummingbirds, so I'm just gonna go with the hummingbird one here. So hummingbirds, they'll get nectar they're nectarivores, okay, from flower. Okay, in the process, they can help distribute pollen some. Bats are also going to be another one, and bees and wasps and even mosquitoes, okay? So then the flower's pollen is distributed, which means that it's going to be able to get that genetic information to other plants and reproduce. Okay, so flowers pollen is distributed. Okay, so both the bird and the flower is benefited in this mutualistic relationship. Okay, this one is probably one that you've not heard of before. And this is called mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza. Okay, so Mycorrhiza. All right, this is actually really important. And a lot of people don't know about it, but about 80% of trees and larger plants have a relationship with fungus. And fungus is so essential to the ecosystem, and it's really crazy. So basically, myco means fungus. So mycologist studies fungi. And rhiza means root. Okay, so mycorrhiza is basically when you have a relationship between the roots and the fungus. And a lot of fungi have this, okay? So here there are some examples that were found. Okay, so oak trees have relationships with mycorrhiza fungi, okay? They live on or in the roots of the oak trees, and they collect nutrients and water for themselves and for the tree as well, okay? Now think about this. Can mushrooms do photosynthesis? No, they can't. Can trees do photosynthesis? Yes, okay? They create carbohydrates and sugars through photosynthesis. So the tree is going to give sugars to the fungus, but now the fungus has a really cool ability to take up nutrients from the soil because it's a decomposer. Okay, so the fungus gives nutrients to the tree, and the tree gives its sugar from photosynthesis to the fungus, okay? So the photosynthesis actually will benefit the fungus, and now the decomposition that the fungus does, because it's uptaking all those nutrients, it's going to give those to the tree. And so without this, a lot of trees and plants would simply not grow well, not get the nutrients they need. And so that's another reason why fungi are super important for the ecosystem. Okay, so that's mutualism. Let's move on to a new term that you've probably not heard of until now, and that's commensalism. Okay, commensalism is when one species benefits, but the other species isn't benefited or harmed. It really just doesn't care. So here's, one's a smiley face. We can do a little plus symbol here. And then here I'll do a 0 symbol, or maybe just a meh face. Okay, maybe you want to write meh. Okay, it's not oma, that's a 0. Okay, so I'm going to color code this one yellow. Yellow's kind of the in-between color. Doesn't really care. It's whatever. And one's like really happy. It's benefiting from this relationship. Okay? So let's look at an example here. So a remora is a shark sucker fish here. Okay? And it rides along the shark, and it feeds on the leftovers of the shark. So the shark really doesn't care, like, okay, he has some buddies along the way, whatever. But after the shark eats a fish or whatever, okay, these fish are going to eat after it. So the shark doesn't really care about their presence, but they really care about the shark. And so they're going to get food from that. So that's a remora fish. So here we could say that the remora fish eat a shark's leftovers. The shark doesn't really care. He's done with his meal. So it's not like there's any competition. Okay? So here we can say the remora fish eats the shark's leftovers, and the shark doesn't care. Okay, so that's that species right there. Okay, now there's several subtypes of commensalism as well. Okay, so one type of commensalism is foracy. Okay, foracy is when one species catches a ride on another species. So there's different forms of this. So, for instance, here are some mites. They're super small critters, okay? They don't have wings, but they will attach onto other creatures so that they can travel along with them and distribute themselves, okay? Here is a Pseudo Scorpion. They're super weird. They just latch onto the legs of different flies, and that's how they get around. Boy, this is coming in and out of focus there. Sorry. Okay. So I hope he doesn't pinch too hard, or maybe his leg would come off. All right. So that's an example of foracy. Here, this anemone is attached to the shell. Okay. So it's benefiting specifically from the fact that it is being, that it's traveling because it's able to get more food. Okay. Now, this one is kind of permanently attached, so this might also be an example of inquilism, which we'll talk about in a moment, but foracy is more like they are, temporarily attached just to distribute themselves, and then they'll detach later. Okay, so here for foracy, the little Pseudo Scorpion is that little guy that is on the leg. He's hitching a ride on the leg of a fly. And it doesn't really bother the fly. The fly can still fly around, and the Pseudo Scorpion will detach soon enough. So the fly isn't really harmed in the process. It's also not really benefited. It just doesn't really care. Okay? So the Pseudo Scorpion gets a benefit. The fly doesn't care. So that's an example of commensalism. Let's look at another example of inquilism. All right, inquilism is when species A uses a home from species B. Okay, so it's using, maybe it's using the organism as a home, or maybe it's using a home that species B created. So for instance, let's say a mouse creates a hole in the ground, and then later a snake uses that hole as its home. Then that snake would be species A benefiting from species B, right? And that's called inquilism. All right. So again, one benefits, one doesn't really care. Okay. Here's an example on an east found. Okay. So barnacles can live on whales. Okay. And they live there for the rest of their life. So it's not just temporary. They live on this whale for the rest of their life. And the whale doesn't really care. It's not harmed or benefited by them being on it. But the barnacles are benefited because they're able to come in contact with a lot more food, and they're able to distribute themselves, okay? So that would be inquilism. So here we can say the barnacles are attached to the whale. All right, and when that happens, the barnacles benefit because they get around, they get more food, all right? They're able to get a lot more water contact. Whales don't really care, okay? And the last type of commensalism that we'll talk about is metabiosis. And this is more when species A benefits from dead species B. So species B isn't even alive to care. It doesn't care because it's not alive. So most common example is hermit crabs, okay? So this is a gastropod shell. So they're kind of similar to snails, or they are snails. They live in the ocean. But after that snail dies, it leaves behind a shell. And the hermit crab's like, hey, this is great. Now I can use that as my little home, as my little protection, okay? So the hermit crab benefits. The gastropod doesn't care because he's dead. So that's metabiosis. Okay, so we can say the hermit crab takes a snail shell. Snail doesn't care. Hermit crab really benefits from that. That's great. All right, now, so those are the first main two types. Mutualism, both benefit. Commensalism, one benefits, the other one doesn't care. Well, what happens if one experiences a benefit at the expense of the other one? Okay, we'll draw a frowny face here and a minus symbol. Okay, minus and a plus. Okay, so what is that? If one experiences a benefit and then the other one, well, it is harmed. That's parasitism. Okay, and typically we think of parasitism as maybe a tick or something like that, which is true, but there's also a lot more involved with parasitism as well. Okay, so here's one Scott found. This is a tapeworm. Okay, really gross. They can get the nutrients they need from human intestines. Obviously, it's not good to have living things like that in your intestines. Might be the same with a dog. Okay, they can get roundworms. That experiences a lot of pain for the dog, but they get the food that they need. Okay, another example would be fleas or ticks. Okay, the tick gets the blood, which is what it needs for its energy, and because it's a sanguinivore. But the human might get Lyme's disease from that. Okay, so the ticks are tick-borne encephalitis. Okay, so tick sucks blood from person. Okay, the tick, he's really happy. He's getting the energy he needs. Person, not so happy. Okay, I had a friend who, she got a tick, she got Lyme's disease, and she is in a wheelchair for the rest of her life because of the way that impacted her. So be careful with those ticks out there. Okay, let's go here with Mensalism. Okay, these are a lot of big words. You do not have to know these words. You don't have to memorize them, but I do want you to just recognize the different types of relationships. And yeah, so Mensalism is kind of a weird one. It's basically when one species isn't really benefited or harmed, so we can do like a meh sign, okay? And then another species actually experiences harm, okay? So one would be, let's do red here, harm, and the other one doesn't really care at all. This is kind of a weird one, but you can, let's just look at an example here. So here's one Scott found. This is a Spanish ibex and a weevil, okay? So the ibex feeds on the shrub that is necessary to keep these weevils thriving, okay? But if it's eating all the shrub, then the weevil's not going to have enough habitat available for it, and so the weevils can be killed. So the weevils are going to experience a harm, but the ibex doesn't really benefit from the fact that it's killing the weevils, okay? It's benefiting from the grass, but it's not really experiencing benefit from the weevils, okay? Another example would be these elephants. They're walking along. They're probably stepping on some insects and smaller animals and killing them. The elephants don't really care. They're not getting benefits from killing other animals by stepping on them, but it just happens to be a byproduct of their travel, okay? So the insects are experiencing harm from the elephants, okay? So here we could say elephant steps on, let's say it steps on a locust or something, okay? So here the elephant, it's not experiencing pleasure from killing these things, but in the process, the locust is experiencing harm, okay? And the last one here, if we combine these two red ones here, where there's a negative effect on both, okay, that is going to be called competition. Species or individuals fight over reproductive advantage. Okay, so if you have two males fighting over a female, or resources like food, water, territory. Okay, so actually, let's make these angry. Okay, there. We'll make them angry there. Yeah. Okay, so this competition could be between two individuals of the same species or between two individuals of different species. So for instance, here's one Joe found, all right. Plants need sunlight, and so the tall trees are going to get more sunlight, and they're going to try to outgrow each other. The smaller trees at the bottom are not going to get very much sunlight. So there's competition. The beech trees around here, super competitive. They grow so fast, they want to take over the forest. And so really, yeah, when you look out at a forest, there is a raging war going on that just is at a totally different time scale than we are. So it's like all the trees are fighting for sunlight, but it just takes decades for that process to unfold. And so you don't really notice it. Not like you would, two rhinos fighting, or here these are does, so they're fighting over this food right here. So they are competing against that. Okay, so here we could say fast growing trees compete for sunlight. Now in the process, one might win, but maybe it'll lose. I mean, it's almost like fighting. Or if you have two, let's say a lion and, let's say a lion and a hyena are fighting over the same prey, okay? Both are going to get scratched up in the process. So it's anger against each other. So that's competition. All right, so those are those types of competition. Let's apply some of these concepts to something that's really interesting with different adaptations that prey use to defend themselves against predators. So remember, an adaptation is basically any feature of an animal that gives it an advantage where it lives. Okay? So one such thing that we talk about is warning signals. So warning signals is a defensive adaptation. It's basically advertising, and it lets predators know, hey, I am not worth eating. Okay? So these warning signals are actually mutualistic. This is a mutualistic relationship because the prey is not eaten, so that's a benefit, and the predator is not harmed. Okay? So if you know something's poisonous, you're going to stay away from it, and it's not going to be eaten or killed or whatever. So that's great. Okay? So this can happen with colors, for instance. So for instance, look at this frog here, this poison dart frog, super colorful. Okay? That's a warning signal. Now you may wonder, okay, why do bright colors automatically mean that it's poisonous? And it is kind of weird that when you see a bright colored animal, you're kind of wary of it. Like, oh, is that poisonous? There's a reason for that. What's going on in that process of thinking is this animal's not camouflaged. Well, if it's not camouflaged, it's brightly colored, it's easily seen. That means it's got some other trick up its sleeve to survive, okay? Because this thing's living and it's not camouflaged. So it must be poisonous or bad tasting or really harmful or something, because predators are still keeping away from it even though it's not camouflaged. So that's how warning signals work. It's brightly colored, really, bad looking. And the reason it's bad looking is because it's so not camouflaged, right? This is a fire salamander that lives around here. It's yellow and black, okay? So all these spots here are yellow, so it kind of looks like that, okay? And it's not camouflaged at all, but it's actually very toxic to your muscles, okay? So bright colors, you're gonna see that is just, hey, don't eat me because I've got some tricks up my sleeve. Tastes, so anything that tastes bad, like a monarch butterfly, birds hate those things. They taste terrible. Okay, sounds, a rattlesnake is gonna be rattling its tail, and so that tells you, hey, I'm loud, I'm not hiding myself, I can kill you. Another big example that we would see is like the bright yellow stripes on a bee, okay? So we see a lot of yellow stripes on creatures like bees and wasps. And that just tells us, hey, I can sting, all right? It's mutualistic because it helps me stay away from you and you don't get harmed. Now, sometimes it's advantageous for other creatures to mimic or to copy, okay, those creatures. So Batesian, there's two types of mimicry, okay? Batesian mimicry occurs when a harmless species resembles a harmful one, okay? So for instance, right here, this little guy, he's yellow and black. This one right here is a hoverfly. He doesn't sting, he's just like a fly. And we have a lot of these around here, okay? They're really cute. If you hold out your hand, then they'll come and they'll land on you, all right? So they're just little hoverflies. This is a wasp, all right? They both look very similar. They have yellow and black stripes, okay? So the hoverfly is harmless, but it kind of mimics the wasp because when a bird sees a hoverfly, the bird's gonna think, oh, maybe it's a wasp. I'm gonna stay away, okay? So it's kind of a dishonest advertising. And that's actually the words that they use, a dishonest signal, okay? So this is actually a type of parasitism. You might be wondering why. Okay, well, the hoverfly actually benefits, and the wasp doesn't benefit from this. And here's why. Because let's say that a bird tries to eat a wasp, and then it gets stung, okay? Next time it sees a hoverfly, it's gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna stay away from anything that has yellow and black stripes. But let's say that a bird eats a hoverfly and the hoverfly can't sting, okay? Then the hoverfly is gonna think, oh, yellow and black stripes are okay. So when it sees a wasp, it's gonna try to eat it. So it just depends on which it eats first, what it's used to. If it's used to eating hoverflies, that's not helpful for the wasp. So the wasp kind of gets his advertising diluted. Like the power of his advertising is weakened by having all of these other guys who aren't harmful, who also have the same advertising. So that's a type of parasitism, okay? Mullerian mimicry, named after this German guy, Herr Müller, okay? So mimicry occurs when a harmful species resembles another harmful one, okay? So they're both harmful, okay? Predator just avoids them altogether, okay? This is a type of mutualism. Well, why is that? Okay, both species work together to teach the predators that their warning signals are effective. Okay, so if we think of a monarch butterfly is a butterfly that's really, orange and black. Okay, and it tastes really bad. Okay, so birds do not like the monarch butterfly. Well, there's another butterfly, and it looks just like the monarch butterfly, but it's a little bit different, and it's a viceroy. Both have orange and black stripes. Both have orange and black stripes, okay? So basically, both taste bad. And so anytime that a bird sees a butterfly with orange and black stripes, it's just gonna stay away. Because it knows no matter what, I know it's going to taste bad. So by having this common signal, the monarch butterfly and the viceroy butterfly both experience benefit because they strengthen each other's. They strengthen the signal or the warning advertising. Okay? Here, the hoverfly weakens the signal of the wasp. Okay, so these are all adaptations that prey use to defend themselves from predators, and you can describe them as mutualistic or parasitic according to the principles that we learned here with symbiosis. Okay, all right. Now you are not going to be having assessment on this because we are running out of time for the end of the year. So this is just fun stuff for you to know. We might do an activity or homework on this or something, but you're not going to receive a grade on this information this year because we are running out of time soon. But there is just a interesting lesson for us to get thinking about how species interact, and you might be able to label some of these things on your food web if you see any of those that are evident there. Okay, so that's all today for Notes 6.3.